I don't know how Netflix did it, but they completely fucking tarnished their entire animation reputation in a span of a month. With a reboot of Magic School Bus that looks like it kinda has the animation equivalent of a meet and fuck game. You took Jaden Smith's tweets and found a way to convert that into a script for a TV show that is Neo Yokio. A show I don't think anyone truly likes or hates. I think most people are just confused by its existence. And now you come out with this show, Big Mouth.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy this Sith, not join them!
Okay, if you take off the rose-colored glasses, and I've been guilty of this too, and look at the entire Netflix original animation catalog, not everything they do is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. A lot of them are pretty fucking awful and pretty cheap. But what Netflix kinda really succeeded at was creating adult animated comedies and shows for older audiences, like BoJack Horseman, F is for Family. I guess Voltron, most people that watch that show are pretty old, and weird, and a bit hasty, don't you think? But Netflix adult shows, pretty good. They have a pretty good track record. So what happened here? Netflix's Big Mouth is probably one of the most disappointing shows of the year for me. Just going off who's creating it, I had some sort of hope. I generally like Nick Kroll. From the limited shit I've seen him in, he seems like a funny guy. He's kind of funny. Oh look, Titmouse, I like them. Most of the shows they work on I really like, and I really like that production company a lot. This could be good. Like, I was somewhat anticipating this show all the way back in 2016. So I have faith that their new show, Big Mouth, will be pretty good. There's not a lot of information about this show. The only stuff I can find is that it's by Netflix. Nick Kroll's in it, and the production company is Titmouse, and I really like their work, and them working with Netflix sounds like a match made in heaven.
This guy is fucking stupid!
But what is essentially the kiss of death to a series, uh-oh, we got a Family Guy person attached to this show. Typically, that doesn't really bode well. Big Mouth is kind of the same situation, but not as bad. Big Mouth is a show about kids going through puberty, but unlike regular puberty where the teenage body starts to develop more into adults for sexual reproduction, puberty in Big Mouth is sort of a supernatural thing where children are visited by the hormone monster.
Are you the puberty fairy?
The fuck did you just call me?
The puberty fairy?
Puberty fairy? I'm the hormone monster. I'm not a fairy. I mean, sure, I fuck around with dudes, but I'm not a fairy.
A monster whose goal is to basically fuck with the children by making them lash out and give in to their sexual desires and awkward, confusing emotions. That and to make a lot of unfunny sex jokes 90% of the time. Basically think Monsters Inc. but with underage kid cum. So one of the things I really don't like about this show's premise is how much squandered potential a lot of this show has. You can easily rework this series and probably make it a much more meaningful show about adolescents maturing into their teens and eventually into grown adults. Like, the show really makes puberty basically one thing, and that is about sex. Sex is a very big part about puberty. Most kids in high school and sometimes disturbingly in middle school experiment sexually with each other. I get it, but it really isn't all about that. I will give the show this, they sometimes try to focus on different aspects of puberty, but then it just shifts hard back into I just want to come to series. The show really does try at times, which is really surprising being that the trailer of the show did not give you that impression in the slightest. It does attempt to have moments where it's supposed to be serious, but these moments really just kind of fail for me. Like where the girl Jessie later in the season finds out her mom and dad's marriage is falling apart and her mother is secretly a lesbian. You know, this could have been a pretty impactful piece of the show's narrative if they spent more time with these parent characters. But the show never really focuses on them to the very end and then expect you to care about them. Like if they built that up a bit more and gave these characters much more screen time, then I actually might praise the show for those bits. But they don't, and it just fails to hit me on any emotional level in the slightest. And I can say that for most of the other attempts the show tries to do. So the serious and emotional moments fail, but maybe the humor can save it from those shortcomings. The humor in the show didn't really gel with me either. Like take this for example, where anytime they would have a character barf for what I guess is comedic effect never worked and never even gotten a chuckle whenever they tried this lame fucking joke like 10 times. And Big Mouth really likes to overextend a joke to where it's not funny anymore. To me, it became really grating, and with the friends I was watching the show with, basically we were all yelling at them just to move on and just shut the fuck up. Like, the show would have like a good joke, but they just keep going and going and going to the point where it ruins the entire thing. You had something, but then you kept running your fucking mouth. Most of the humor in the show is supposed to be funny because look how shocking this is. And sometimes, I will admit, it lands pretty well. There are some scenes in the show I can't show you because, you know, YouTube, that the shock humor actually is kind of funny. Like where the main character in the first episode played basketball against literal dicks. I found that scene in the first episode, which is just a terrible introduction to this series, quite funny. But some of the other attempts at shock humor, like the talking kid vagina, really wasn't funny to me in the slightest. and was just more uncomfortable. Which, if you're not into seeing a little girl's genitalia, then maybe step away from the show, especially the 5th episode. But hey, if you're into naked little girls, you could go get your fucking jar of Vaseline and go to town, dude. Humor, not really the best, but there are some jokes here or there that got a good chuckle. But those jokes are very few and far between. You know, I didn't really like the humor, so how are the characters in the show? The characters in the show are not really that hateable, which is surprising. I actually kind of do like the main two characters, Nick and Andrew. I kind of liked them, and I felt their friendship for the most part was pretty well done. And after learning that the show is somewhat of a real sort of telling of Nick Kroll and his longtime friend Andrew Goldberg's friendship, I felt like they did a pretty good job translating that into the series. Jay the Mexican kid had moments, but most of the time we were subjugated to him was mostly with B plots, where sometimes they were more interesting and funnier than the actual A plot of the series, but mostly relegated to rather pointless stories at times. Though I will say, the episode where Nick and Andrew sleep over at his house and almost eat a cum cracker is probably my personal favorite episode in the series, just due to the fact that a kid almost eats a cracker covered in cum. Jessie, the most prominent girl character in the show, is probably my least liked child, mostly because she's the lightning rod for most of the dramatic moments in the show, which I've already said were not really that great, and the subplots including her were quite boring. Missy really doesn't do that much in the series and really is just supposed to be an innocent child going through puberty, so don't really have much to say about her. And the supporting cast of characters is where I probably have the most negatives about, because they really add nothing at times and are quite unfunny. Like the parent characters really do fuck all and expect me to care about these characters like near the end of the series. Oh, fuck you, no. The Jewish dad character, where basically the biggest joke is he's the biggest Jew in the world, and sometimes he had funny absurd Jew jokes I found pretty humorous, but all the jokes about him shitting himself eating scallops went on way too long. The hormone monster, a quite prevalent character, really wasn't all that funny, and the rules for him make no sense to me at certain points in the show. Like, apparently he's invisible to most people in the show's universe, but then sometimes the show just breaks the rules just for the sanctity of a joke. Like, lay down the line. Can people see him or not? Can only kids going through puberty can see him? What are the rules? Because there's like points where they talk to like regular humans, and they're like, oh yeah, you're my hormone monster. He literally talks to like a celebrity from like some fucking American rock band, and he can fully see him. And he's talking directly to him. Like, what are the rules here? This also applies to the ghosts as well, where it's clearly the children can see the ghosts of Wellington, but when they're out and about in the middle of fucking New York City, the characters in the background seem to not notice his spiritual entity before them. I don't know, I'm looking too deep into this show about kids coming. But what I mostly have my gripes with these lesser important characters is that a lot of them are voiced by Nick Kroll, and he's just doing a really unfunny, intolerable voice for some of these characters. Like this fat little shit, where it's just him being a snobby white girl.
Yeah, are you gonna like divorce her dad and then marry some guy who lives in another state? And then sometimes your daughter has to like Uber to school because it's cheaper for you to fly back on a Tuesday, or like what?
That would be fine if the character had very limited speaking lines, but this character is featured quite a lot in a lot of the episodes in this show. The art and animation is probably the worst aspect of this show. The art design for the show is pretty bad, the characters look fucking terrible, their eyes are way too big, these designs do not work from certain perspectives the show has. Like, I hate how small these children are. It pisses me off. They're supposed to be in middle school, but yet they aren't taller than a fucking Little Tikes basketball hoop for babies. Like, these animators and directors are not that dumb. This was intentional. Intentional or not, the art design just doesn't work for me, and for the most part, most people, I've seen this show get destroyed on fucking both Twitter, Tumblr, pretty much any place where they would talk about an animation has fucking roasted this show for how bad it is. And it truly is fucking atrocious. I will say the intro is pretty nice. I don't know how much of a compliment that is. I mean, the intro is supposed to be real nice, but I think it's pretty cool. It kind of reminds me of both Community and Clone High in a weird way. Big Mouth, not really that great. It was better than I expected it to be after that fucking atrocious trailer the marketing team put forward. Like, I thought this show is gonna be completely abysmal. But this is nothing I truly suggest to people, unless you possibly watch it with a bunch of people and just kind of laughing at how bad the art is at times, which is a quite fun experience in my opinion. If you're gonna do that, go ahead and roast the fuck out of the show. It's quite fun. But watching this alone, I would probably be more annoyed by the end of it. Like, I felt myself laughing more at the show than with the show. If I were to give it like a score or something, I would probably give it like a 5.